Hello there, this is Mr. Anderson with another podcast for GCSE Citizenship Revision, and this time it's for Theme 1, which is Human Rights. And if you've got the revision sheet there, those will help me as I talk you through what's going on here. So, human rights covers a huge area that you need to be aware of. They are things that matter to us every single day. They're also things that affect people all over the world, but sometimes in very, very different ways. So some of the things that you've looked at in human rights would include about your identity and what a community is, and Britain as a nation with people from lots of different communities. We'll also look at roles, rights and responsibilities of people in work and the police, and then we'll look at criminal and civil justice and what the courts do and what your rights and responsibilities are there. But let's go through the sheet and see what you can make of this. So beginning with our moral, legal, civil and criminal rights and laws. One of the questions here asks you to distinguish between moral and legal rights and responsibilities. Some of these things are written down in law and they're there to protect us or to tell us things we can't do or things that we must do. Some of them, however, are things that we've built up because of perhaps our religious background. So for example, staying faithful in a relationship, number 6 on the list there, whilst not a legal responsibility, people might argue that it's a moral one. On the other hand, carrying a knife clearly has both moral and legal responsibilities to do with that. Now, British law has developed in 2 different ways over centuries. We have a system where we've got criminal and civil law. Now, civil cases and laws are about disputes between individuals or groups. And these are very often arguments about rights. People's rights, for example, company law, adoption, divorce, accidents at work, and consumer rights. Criminal law, however, deals with cases that are generally seen as being more serious. Things such as murder, theft, drug dealing, and so on. Now, in a criminal case, the conflict is generally between the government, acting on behalf of all of us as citizens of a nation, and the person who has been accused. If you have a look through the table on the first page of the revision document, you'll see 6 different examples. Can you work out which are criminal and which are civil? Don't forget you can pause this podcast at any time to try and have a go at some of the activities on these sheets. Now again, on page 1 there, you can see a picture of Jeremy Paxman from Newsnight. And the question he's asking is, can you think of an occasion when the government should have control over what is reported in the news? In Britain and most other countries that we recognise as democracies, there is a right freedom of the media and freedom of expression. But are there circumstances in which you think that this right should be withdrawn or limited? Turning over to the next page now, and we're talking about communities and identities. And what is rather good about Britain, although not quite so obvious here on the Wirral, is that Britain's a very diverse community. It's over hundreds of years that people from all over the world have come and lived and settled in Britain. They've migrated from all over the world, perhaps from our former colonies in parts of Africa and Asia, and they've come to live in Britain. And this is why we have people of many different ethnic groups and many different religions living in this country. And there are 6 questions there that ask you to consider the impact that these different communities and cultures have had on changing British life over the years. Some of the things might seem quite obvious, like the kinds of food that we eat and can buy at the shops or get from a takeaway, but others might not be. Pop music, for example, and rock and roll, they all came from the music that was brought over by black slaves to America centuries ago. And it's only because of them and that settlement and change in a community in America that's given us the kind of music that we listen to today. Moving on to the issue about discrimination. Discrimination, as we know, comes in many, many forms, and perhaps one of the most obvious ones we tend to think of is racial discrimination. And I've given you an example there to start you off with one of the questions on that page. But there are other types of discrimination as well, some that seem more or less obvious. Can you think of the kinds of discrimination that are perhaps outlined in law and others that may or may not be? For example, there's a big debate raging across the entire world right now with a UN conference on discrimination. And one of the issues they're discussing is, should religious discrimination be outlawed? Many people in Western countries think it shouldn't be, but many in Islamic countries in particular feel that a right to protect someone's religion from being attacked, defamed or discriminated against is very important. What's your view? Don't forget you can pause this podcast at any time to have a go at some of the questions on these sheets. Turning over again, we're now thinking about our rights as consumers. And consumers, of course, are the people who drive our economy forward. And here we've got some phrases such as caveat emptor, which means buyer beware. It's a Latin phrase. And it's asking you to think why this might be important when you buy a second-hand car. Of course, that's just an example. Buyer beware is something that we should all be wary of. There's no point buying something that you don't want or something that might be dangerous. Where are your rights in those circumstances? We've all seen the signs in shops about this does not affect your statutory rights if you want to take something back. But what are your statutory rights as a consumer if a product doesn't work properly? Have you heard of Trading Standards, an organisation run by your local council that can give you rights and fight for your corner if something has gone wrong? Our rights as consumers, of course, are only part of this. We have rights as employees and employers. Wherever you work or if you manage a company, we have responsibility for each other, but they're different. An employee is someone who works somewhere, and the employer is the boss, the person in charge who actually takes on that person. And we have rights for ourselves, for each other, and between each other. For example, we should have a contract of employment that says what our roles and duties are, what happens if we don't meet them, and what happens if we exceed them, and how we work with our colleagues, where we work, and so on. That defines our rights in law, and it's our contract of employment that actually gives us the role that we're supposed to undertake in work. It also tells our employers what they have to do to support us, develop us, and protect us. And there are many other organisations there to help. For example, many people in Britain are members of trade unions, and trade unions are there to try and help people in particular industries who want protection from bad treatment at work, or the trade union can work on behalf of everyone in a workplace to negotiate pay rises and things like that. In major disputes, for example, recent ones that we've had between train companies and the London Underground and the Mayor of London and Transport for London, an organisation called ACAS gets involved. This is a group of independent experts who help both sides and talk them through to see if they can come to an agreement whilst people might otherwise be going on strike or losing their jobs or being treated badly, for example. Now might be a good time to pause, have a look back over Theme 1 and see if there are any areas that you're not sure of, that you want to look up, that you want to find more information about. Don't forget you've all been given your own copy of the Citizenship Today textbook, which we will need back, incidentally. If you haven't got one, why not ask your teacher if you can borrow one between now and the exam? They're extremely good at guiding you through some of the issues that you need. And that's it for Theme 1, Human Rights.